Hello everyone, welcome to the Golden Retriever Paint Along. My name is Allie, and I'm just restarting this video because we ran into an issue before where half the screen was not showing. Facebook was showing this in portrait mode and it needed to be landscape, so for some reason it was cutting it off. So I would love anyone who is watching who jumped over from the other video, let me know guys if you can see this whole video, if it's in landscape. I would greatly appreciate it so we can get this sorted out. I hope those of you that were watching before are jumping on over from the other video. I apologize, you just never know what Facebook's gonna throw at us. Hi Tina. Hi Brenda. All right, so if somebody could let me know about if the screen is showing everything, horizontal landscape, that would be awesome. Jan says, looks good. Thank you, Jan, you got my back. All right, so I'm just gonna go over this one more time because we've got some new people coming in. Again, my name is Allie. I am a painting instructor and I teach workshops here at my studio, and I also teach classes online, and every Monday at 5 Eastern, I do a free demo with you guys, a free paint along demo where I teach a sample step-by-step, some small little 8x10 pieces, and many of you watch every week, and a lot of you paint with me every week. So I offer a download on my website that has these outlines, and you can find that at alliekstudio.com if you're interested in doing this demo. You can actually always watch these afterwards as a replay. So if you are new watching this now and you're like, gee, I would really like to do that painting with her, you can go back and get the download on my website and watch it again. So we're getting a little bit of a late start because we had some technical difficulties, so I'm gonna jump right in and we're gonna get started. We're gonna do this Golden Retriever. So I'm going to move the camera so you guys can see what we're doing here. That looks pretty good. I like to show my palette so you can see how I'm mixing the colors. And let me know guys if you are doing this paint along with me. It's always fun to see who is painting with me in this demo. All right, and I'm going to try to follow along with your comments here. And we're gonna get started. Okay, so as I mentioned before, this is what the outlines looks like. And you guys can find that on my website. So you use transfer paper to trace the outlines on your panel. And then I just painted over these with a skinny little script liner brush like this. And I made a purple using white and Payne's Gray and alizarin crimson. So I like to kind of make like a muted purple just to kind of cover up the outlines. All right, so that is where you are at if you're painting with me. So we always kick off these demos kind of the same way. We start kind of mapping out the shapes. So I'm going to make a purple with Payne's Gray and alizarin crimson. So this time I don't have any white in that mixture. I only use the white on the outlines because I'm trying to cover up that graphite line, because we don't really want to see like a pencil graphite line. So adding the white to that mixture makes it opaque, and it just kind of gives us a nicer start, not having those pencil lines showing. All right, so I'm using square tip brushes. This is a, let's see, this is a number 5. These are Royal Langnickel brushes. I'm also using Golden Fluid acrylics for this demo, and if you get the download with the outlines, I include a list of the paint colors that I'm using. So I'm watering my paint down right now, just thinning with water, and I'm gonna start comparing light versus dark. So I've got my reference image here, I'm looking at my lines, and I can see that the background is darker than the foreground. See how bright it is on the head of our Golden Retriever here? So by pushing the background darker, I'm going to bring that highlight in. So right now we are not looking at color, we are just looking at value. So we're just comparing which side of the line is light and which side is dark. This is all part of our underpainting. All right. You can see how far back I'm holding my brush. That helps me to stay loose, to not get too hung up on the details. And I don't need to fill in the whole background with this dark. I just want to be able to go along that edge to show that this is bright and this is dark. All right, and kind of moving down into the dog, I see that it's dark here where the ear is meeting the head. And then over here it flips and it's dark underneath the ear. Wash that in a little bit dark right there to make this edge of the dog look bright. And you can see there's a little halo around the edge of the ear where we've got like some hairs that are picking up light. So you can see like the skin is dark right there, but then we've got that little halo of light. Susan said, one of these days I'm going to find time to do this. Susan, next week. Next week is the week. I want you to join me. Let's do it. I think you will be glad you did. All right, so I'm just moving along. I'm looking for the dark shapes. So one thing I will say is, you know, there's a lot of lines on here right off the bat. And so what I often do is I look for the shapes that are easiest to identify first. So I can see that it's very dark along the gums of the dog. And so I can find that dark area really easily. And by pulling that out right away, it helps me to find where other things are. So I use that like as a context clue. Whenever I'm a little bit confused about what goes where, I just find the easy stuff first. And then the other things tend to fall into place later once you've found some of those easy shapes to identify. So that is a technique that I do over and over again whenever things feel a little bit overwhelming. It's like, just do something easy. You know, it's like that's a good way to live life too. Whenever you get a little overwhelmed, just accomplish the things you can. All right, so we found that easy shape, right? Then we've got another dark shape on the edge of the tongue here. Well, it's actually underneath the ear, but it's butted up against the tongue. So I'm gonna find that easy shape. All right, looking around, I see some dark shapes on the nose that are pretty easy to identify. So I'm gonna drop those in right away. Inside the nostrils there is dark, and then underneath. And we're gonna come back and push the dark areas darker. So like inside the nostrils, I know it's gonna be darker than what the top edge of the nose is, but I'm still putting it in as the same tone right now because I'm just kind of putting a basic dark shadow in everywhere. I'm not really making some areas darker and some lighter. It's all kind of getting the same treatment. We'll separate some of the even darker areas in the next step. Let's see, Jacqueline says, maybe your husband should have a class to teach us how to make an easel that holds our paint trays. Yeah, yeah, you guys, my husband made this little attachment for my easel. I don't know if you can see this, but it's awesome. And it has a hole for my paint, or for my water bucket. I don't think you guys can see it. I'll show it later if I have time. All right, so we're gonna wash in some dark in the background here. That's gonna make the edge of the dog look bright by washing this in dark. And it's dark underneath, we'll call it the chin. Linda said, is that an iPad showing your photo? Yes, it is, Linda. So I always look at my image on a screen. That's probably like my #1 tip for people, is to look at your image on a screen rather than a printout, because you can see everything so much better. So this is an iPad Pro. You guys don't need to have a Pro. I just have this because I use it for a lot of other things, but really anything that will show your image on a screen is going to be terrific. And I actually just sent out an email to everyone on my list that has my adapter that holds my iPad and my tripod. I sent some links to that. So if you are on my email list, you got that sent to you. And if you are not on my email list, you can join that on my website, right on the homepage. I send out a lot of little tips and tools that I use on a pretty regular basis. All right. I don't know if you guys can hear, it is raining really hard here in Chattanooga today. I think that was part of my technical difficulties when I was starting this demo, as I was using the Wi-Fi here at my studio, and I don't think it's working right now. So we are just going on data right now, and hopefully our connection will continue working all right. So again, I'm still just using this combination of alizarin crimson and Payne's gray to wash in these shadows. Everything's kind of getting the same treatment. Hi, Kelly in California. You're gonna paint your golden puppy. Awesome. I hope that you will share that in my group when you're done. If you guys don't know, I have a Facebook group called Allie's Paint Friends, and that is where everybody shares the pieces that they do both in my paint along demos and things that are inspired by my instructions. So it's always fun to see what pops up there. And if you're new doing this paint along, please share your piece in Allie's Paint Friends. It's really fun to see, and everybody's very supportive in that group. I love it. Do this a little darker here. We've got a dark shadow on the tongue. I'm going to bring that down a little bit more now that I look at it. I don't know if you guys notice how I kind of bop all around. I don't really stay in one place, because I will often decide that something should get treated maybe a little bit differently based on how I paint other parts of the painting. So I like to kind of jump around the whole piece. Hi, Joni in Alabama. You're gonna paint later? Sounds good. All right, I think I've sorted out most of the shapes here. Maybe I've got a little more dark right here. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good for this first pass. Actually, you know what? This whole chunk of the ear is all pretty dark. So I'm actually going to go in and wash that whole section in dark now that I look at it. That seems to make a little more sense to me. All right, so now we're gonna move into the next step. So we are going to push the dark areas a little bit darker. So we're gonna use the same two colors, alizarin crimson and Payne's gray, but we are going to push the darkest areas darker. Let's see, Jill says, are you doing the midtones now? Yeah, Jill, basically I'm kind of looking for like the darkest 50% of the image, and I'm giving it all the same treatment in this first pass. And so now as I move into the darker tones, then I'll kind of separate those midtones from like the really dark tones. So it's alizarin crimson, Payne's gray. We could add a little bit of phthalo green in there if we really wanted to make it like black. That's my standard black recipe, but I don't really think we need to for right now. Okay, so like I mentioned before, we're gonna start with finding the areas that are easy to identify. So like the really dark areas. We're gonna push that in pretty dark. I think I might add a little more Payne's gray. That felt a little bit too red. I'm looking for those really dark areas. And it's dark on the other side of the tongue here. Inside the mouth. So as we build up these darks, it just starts to give more and more dimension. So we're not going over everything we did before, we're just finding those really darkest areas. Got a little bit of the gums right there, and then inside the ear is real dark here. And that underside of the nose we see is pretty dark. Inside the nostrils. I'm gonna switch down to a smaller brush now because I'm still using my number 5. I think I'm gonna go down to my number 3 now to get a little more specific here. I always try to use like the largest brush that I can for the job. That helps me to work a little bit quicker, helps me to not get too obsessed with the details. That's one of my tips for painting loose, is to use a large brush when you can. All right, moving over to the eye. And as I do this eye, I'm gonna zoom in on it. See, isn't that that's awesome when you're painting from a screen? I love to be able to just zoom right in and you can see the shapes so much better. So another reason why, always paint from a screen. And I'm gonna hopefully not block this with my head, but I wanna get in a little bit closer so I can get these shapes pretty accurate here. So I'm just looking for the darkest tones here. And I am kind of choking up on my brush a little bit when I'm trying to get pretty specific here, because I wanna get that right. There we go, and then I can zoom back out. All right, and then we've got it kind of dark underneath the ear. On the edge of the ear, like we talked about, where the skin is. Right, so I think that's probably like all of our darkest areas. I think we've, somebody give me a thumbs up when you see the video again. Because I want to make sure that we can get this through today. All right, Jacqueline says it's back. Okay, thanks Jacqueline. All right, so I just mentioned how we're going to do a complementary color underpainting. Complementary means opposite on the color wheel. So the dog is going to be pretty warm tones because it's golden. The background is going to be cool blue tones, which means for the underpainting, we're going to do the opposite. Looks like we've got a few issues with the video here not being in focus. Let's hope that this sorts itself out before it becomes too big of a problem. All right, weather delays, that's what, yeah. All right, so I'm gonna do a wash in the background of a warm tone, like I mentioned. So I think we're going to do Yeah, I think we're gonna do my burnt orange recipe. So I like to make a burnt orange with alizarin crimson, enhance the yellow, opaque. And we're gonna wash that into the background. We're just gonna go right over all the purple. I apologize that the video connection is not awesome today, guys. It is what it is. We're gonna just roll with it and hope that hopefully the replay will be decent. All right, so we got some blue over here that we're gonna put this orange down for the underpainting. Okay. Now for the nose, I'm going to use this same burnt orange recipe because the nose is going to be cool tones, and even under the nose is going to be cool tones. So I'm going to use the same burnt orange here. We're just gonna keep going with that. And also in the areas of black, we're still gonna use that burnt orange. We'll just go over that tooth too. All right. It looks like our connection is okay, at least on the footage that I'm watching on my screen here. So I'm hoping if somebody can tell me if it has straightened out on their end, I would really appreciate that. So the tongue is going to be like pink tones. So I think we're gonna do a wash of phthalo green, blue shade under the tongue. Minetta says it's better. Okay, super, thank you, Minetta. We're pushing through. Hopefully this won't come back. All right, so we're gonna go over the inside of the mouth with green. You guys probably remember we did the same thing on the other dogs' tongues. Last week, did we have? Yeah, we had a tongue. Last week we did a Australian Shepherd, and we had a tongue open, and we did the same green inside. All right. And then, under all of this golden tone, we are going to do, let's see, what are we gonna do? I think we're gonna do a purple. And some of you guys know that I absolutely love Permanent Violet Dark by Golden, but unfortunately that color is no longer available. I think they're working on trying to bring it back. They're having trouble with the pigments, but you can mix this color. So the way we're gonna make purple is we're going to use quinacridone magenta, and then we're gonna put just a speck of phthalo blue green shade in there. And those two together will get pretty close to my favorite purple tone. And we're using purple underneath the golden dog because purple and yellow are kind of opposites. So we're gonna call the golden tone yellow, and that's why we're gonna do a purple wash. So you can see this is pretty close to my favorite purple tone that many of you have seen before. I always use this underneath my skin tones when I paint portraits. It just makes a really pretty underpainting color. Linda says the video seems straightened out. Thank you, Linda. And thank you that it is straight. Happy to hear that. All right. I was wondering what we were gonna have to do if I couldn't sort this out today. All right, so up at the top where it's gonna be really bright, I'm gonna put my purple tone in really light up there because I know that it's going to be bright. So I'm gonna make my underpainting bright. I did it darker down at the bottom because I knew that was going to be a darker tone. So I'm gonna wash this underpainting in really light up here. And I'm just watering it down. I'm just thinning it with water right now. After we finish the underpainting, we'll start thinning with a glazing medium. And I know the eye is more of a blue tone, so technically purple's not the opposite, but I don't want to get like too specific with putting my underpainting tones down. I kind of generalize a little bit. All right, so we're just about done with this underpainting wash, and we want this to be totally dry before we layer anything else on top of it. So I'm just kind of trying to scoop up any of my really wet areas to get those to dry. I usually tell you guys how, you know, if I wasn't doing this as a demo, if I was just doing this on my own, which many of you are, I'd probably just walk away for a few minutes and let this dry. But since I'm doing this as a live demo and the show must go on, I'm just kind of scooping up my wet areas. Let's see, Sherry says, what color was the tongue again? The tongue is Phthalo Green Blue Shade by Golden. And the burnt orange I made with Alizarin Crimson and Hansa Yellow Opaque. I'm just pushing some of these dark areas a little bit darker with my purple because I know it's going to be a little darker there. And maybe by the eye too, we'll push that a little darker. All right, good enough. Melissa asked, what's the app you use to make the original Pic Fuzzy? I use the app PixArt, and I like the Geode filter. And if you do some digging through the videos here on my Facebook page, I did create a video showing how to apply the Geode filter, but it was a while back, like it was last spring or maybe February, I think. So you might have to go back pretty far back in my videos to see that. Okay, so let's put some color in the background right now because that is dry. And so we're gonna do blue in the background. And I'm going to grab, let's see, what size brush do I want? I'm going to use my number 5 brush, I think. I can get some decent brush strokes with that. I don't have huge areas in the background that I'm filling in. So I'm gonna make a blue, and I'm gonna keep it darker on the left side. So I'm gonna start with the darker area. I'm gonna make my blue with Payne's Gray, and looking for a clean spot on my palette. Payne's Gray and a little bit of white, and just a speck of Phthalo Blue Green shade, which is a much more intense blue. And now I'm going to thin my paint with glazing medium. So I'm using Liquitex matte medium, but you can use any brand. But from here on out, I won't be thinning with water. I'll be thinning with the glazing medium. So again, this blue is Payne's Gray, a little bit of white, and a little bit of Phthalo Blue Green shade. And I'm gonna drop this into the dark areas, and I want to stress that we don't want to cover up all of our underpainting orange. So I'm just gonna drop this in loosely, leaving some spaces between my brush strokes. I also like to leave kind of a little halo of that underpainting color around my subject. I tend to do that a lot. We'll put a little bit down here. And because I have this thinned with glaze and it's got some of that orange underpainting coming through, what happens is it kind of dulls my color down a little bit, but that's kind of what I want right now. I'll make the color more vibrant as I build up my layers. All right, so I think that's good. Now I'm gonna brighten up my blue just a little bit more. And the way that I'm going to do that is by adding some white to it and a pinch more of that Phthalo Blue Green shade, the more intense blue. So now it's going to be a little bit more opaque because I've got less glaze in it because I added some white. And I'm gonna just drop this on top in a few places, kind of overlapping some of those darker brush strokes. Still remember, don't cover up all that orange. Let it kind of play around. All right, good enough for right now. Let's move into the dog. So I think I want to start off by just like carving out this really bright highlight on the head, because I think that's going to help to just kind of anchor where things are. I want to find those bright highlights. So I'm going to make sure that I clean off my brush really well, because I don't want to have any blue on my brush. And I'm going to make this really bright kind of golden color. So I'm going to get some clean white, as my white's a little contaminated. I'm actually going to put that in a new spot. And I'm going to clear out the hole in my paint, otherwise it'll squirt everywhere. All right, I'll get some clean white. And I'm going to get some clean yellow, because my yellow's kind of contaminated. Did you guys see that? The hole was plugged, and so it did the thing where it squirted everywhere. Don't do that at home. All right, because this paint is too expensive to waste. All right, so I'm gonna use some white, and I'm going to use a little bit of that yellow that I just squirted everywhere. And then a little bit of Pyrrole Red Light. So white, Hansa Yellow Opaque, and Pyrrole Red Light. And we're going to use this to start pulling out some of those brightest highlights on the dog. And it's going to probably look a little too yellow to start off, but we will come back and kind of add more white on top to brighten it up even further. But remember not to cover up all your purple. Try really hard to leave some little bits of that purple showing. I don't really have any glaze in here, Judy. I'm keeping this pretty opaque right now because I really want this to stand out, since this is such a dramatic highlight. I get asked a lot, like, how much glaze do you add, and how do you know when to add glaze? What's the recipe? And I don't really have like an exact formula, because it's really just one of those things you kind of get the feel for. You kind of determine whether you want the brush strokes to stand out as opaque, bold strokes, or whether you want some of that underpainting tone to show through. So I just kind of adjust my recipe to correspond with how transparent I want the paint to be. And I think it's just one of those things, the more you do it, the more you kind of follow my process and use these paints, you just get a little bit more comfortable with like how much glaze you want to have on there. Pat's asking what yellow. I'm using Hansa Yellow Opaque from Golden. And that's actually the only yellow that I buy. It's a really nice, strong yellow. So it packs a lot of punch. You can pretty much use it for anything. I really like it. I don't have a very large palette of different colors that I use. I only have maybe 8 colors that I mix everything from. So although the Golden paints are, like I said, not cheap, you don't really have to buy a lot of different colors because their pigments are so strong. You can mix really whatever you need with a few colors. So again, this recipe I'm using right now is Hansa Yellow Opaque, Pyrrole Red Light, and White. I'm just jumping around looking for these bright highlights and leaving little bits of that purple showing through. Now the highlights down here they're not as bright as the ones on the edge. Do you see that? This whole area is kind of in shadow, so I'm not gonna paint those in with this color. I think those are gonna need to be a little bit darker. I'm just looking for those really bright areas that feel like they're glowing, and I'm dropping this highlight in there. I am trying to follow with your comments, guys, but I'm also painting. So if I do miss any of your questions, I do try to go back after the demo and give any answers that I am able to share with you guys. So keep the questions coming, and I'll get to them after if I don't get to it during the demo. Let's see, Sue said, can you share why the pure underlay, purple? So when you do a complementary color underpainting, Sue, it makes the top tone feel more vivid because it's contrasted by its opposite. So that's one of the reasons I do it, but it's just kind of a preference. It's really fun to play with the opposites, layering the color on top of the opposite tone. All right, so I think that's good for right now. I'm going to push this just a little bit darker, and then we'll put some of those highlights that are more in the shadows. So the way I'm gonna push it darker, I'm gonna add a little bit more Hansa yellow to it, but then I'm gonna add a little bit of alizarin crimson, which is more of like a brownish red. And I'm also gonna put a little bit of glaze in there now, because that will allow some of that purple to show through and make our highlight not quite as dramatic. So this is going to go in some of these areas of shadow that have some highlights on them. You see how this tone is a little bit darker than what we were using? And you'll notice I'm not painting like every little hair. I'm looking for the large shapes, the large forms, the ones that feel the most important, and I'm including those. So there's a lot of generalizing that I'm doing, and we can kind of add more detail later, but as I start the process, I'm trying to kind of lump together the shapes. Moving this along, and you see how I'm just like laying down a stroke and I'm leaving it alone. I'm not blending it in, I'm just setting it down. And the purple really works nicely in the shadows, so I don't have to actually paint in all my darks. Some places I can just kind of let that purple be the dark. It's hard to bring that purple back, so I always stress, like, leave more of it because you can always cover up more of the purple, but it's really hard to bring it back. So now as we go into the ear, these highlights are even a little bit darker. So I think I'm going to mix this color up a little bit darker. I'm gonna add a quick little highlight on the eyelid there before I do that. Okay, so now I'm going to add a little more yellow and a little more alizarin crimson to my mixture, which is going to make it more of that golden tone. Put a little more glaze in there to thin it out, and then we'll put some of these darker, the highlights in some of these darker areas. Didn't mean to do that. And because I've got like this kind of thinned with glaze, like I said, it's leaving some of that purple underpainting pulling through, which means I don't have to work as hard. I can kind of just thin my paint to allow that to become darker. It's kind of like I'm cheating by building up that underpainting. It makes it easier for me as I'm creating contrast in the later steps. All right, so now it gets even darker here. So I'm gonna add more alizarin crimson and Hansa yellow. And I'm just gonna build up a little bit texture down in the darkest part of the ear. All right. And this gets pretty dark here. I feel like I haven't pushed that quite dark enough. I'm gonna add a little more alizarin crimson and just try to push that dark shadow a little more. We might have to build that up with some cool tones later, but I probably should have built that up a little darker when I was doing my purple, but didn't do it quite how I would have liked. Same thing here, a little darker there. All right. So let's put some of these cool tones on the snout, because you can see that's showing up like almost blue. Let's see, Sue says, do you need a light touch laying color down with medium over the underlay? I think you mean over the underpainting. I guess, I never really thought about how my touch was. I don't know if it's super light or not. I am just really kind of dramatically applying the paint. Okay, so let's talk about this cool tone here, which is kind of like a gray. We're gonna make that, we're gonna find a new spot to make that, and we're going to use Payne's Gray and a little bit of titanium white. But we want to also kind of dull this down. So I'm going to do Payne's Gray, a little bit of alizarin crimson, and I'm also going to put a little speck of Hansa yellow in there. So it's Payne's Gray, alizarin crimson, Hansa yellow, and white. And I'm thinning it with some glaze. And so this is going to give me like a cool gray tone. And that's going to contrast that orange, burnt orange that I put down before. And we're gonna drop some of this on the nose as well. We'll push the dark areas of the nose that are showing up black, we'll push those a little bit blacker later on. Blacker, I don't think that is a word. I meant to say darker. Sorry guys. All right, and I think we can use some of this gray tone kind of around this eye here and around this eye, inside the eye. I guess the white of the eye will kind of drop some of that gray in. And yeah, maybe I'll just do that much of the gray for right now. All right. Now it does get lighter, so it's the darkest here, but then it kind of gets even brighter. So I'm going to add a little more white to that recipe now. And it feels a bit more blue, so I'm gonna put a touch of phthalo blue green shade in there. Put a little more glaze in there to offset that white and blue that I put in. And now we'll kind of drag this out into the highlight. You can see this is a little bit lighter than what we had down before, keeping my paint pretty thin with glaze. And we can put some highlight there to separate the nose. there's a little bit of this color under the eye here, kind of by the eyebrow. Highlight on top of the nose with that. I see some of this coming down on the side of the tongue here too. So some of the hair is kind of cooler right underneath the tongue. I'm gonna add a little bit of this cool blue tone, or not blue, I guess it's gray. I'm gonna just add some of that into the fur there. All right. I'm gonna add a little more white to it to lighten it up even further, because this feels pretty bright to me right here. So more white to that gray that I made. And maybe we'll even make it a little more blue, adding just a touch of phthalo blue green shade. Did you see how I barely touched it with my brush? That's such a super strong color that you hardly need any of it. And it really has a dramatic effect on your tone. Maybe we'll use a little bit of this to put these teeth in. Just kind of using the side of my brush. It's not quite the right color, but I just want to get some, I don't want to forget about those teeth. Over here, they're a little bit warmer. I'll probably paint that in with a different tone. All right. Let's put some color on the tongue, because that's kind of distracting. So we're going to make a pink tone. We're going to start it off darker, because you see how it's really dark on the inside of the tongue. It's really only bright along the edge. So I'm going to use my quinacridone magenta and Payne's gray. So it's going to be kind of a purple. I'm going to put a little bit of white in there, titanium white. And I'm going to thin it with some glaze. We're gonna put this in the darkest areas of the tongue. It's pretty dark in there. Okay, and I'm gonna put that along the gums too, this purple tone. When in doubt, make something purple. That is just a good way to live life. Okay, now let's put the highlight in. And so we're gonna make the highlight of pink using quinacridone magenta. I'll find a new spot here. And some white. And let's just do those two for right now. I'm gonna put a little glaze in there. Quinacridone magenta and white. And we'll catch the edge of the tongue. And then you can see how the tongue kind of goes up and over that tooth. We don't want to cover up all the green, so be careful that not to do that. You want to leave a few little windows of it showing. And we're going to probably brighten up that tongue later, but for right now we just wanted to get some color on there. Okay, let's put these teeth in so they don't stay green. I need to find my smaller brush. I'm going to go down to my number 1 brush to get those teeth in. All right, so I'm gonna make this the white of the teeth, but I'm gonna make it more of a gold tone because they're really not bright white. So I'm going to use white, I'm going to use Hansa Yellow Opaque and Alizarin Crimson to make this warm golden tone for the teeth. Teeth are never as white as what you think they are. Drop that color in there, leaving some little bits of the green showing. Cut that tooth. And we'll put this one in right there. And we'll come back and brighten those teeth up just a pinch later. But for right now, we're just gonna leave them that kind of gold color. All right, I want to put in some kind of bright, cool highlights, like on the nose and in the eyes. So I'm gonna make this bright, cool color with white and phthalo blue green shade. So it's gonna be pretty intense, but it makes such a pretty fun blue color that I like to drop this into my paintings. So it's just white and phthalo blue green shade. And we'll put some sparkle in the flash of the eye here. And we've got a little sparkle on the nose, kind of on the edge of the nose and underneath the nose. It's usually wet, so we often will see like this cool wet highlight under the nose. Put some along the edge too, maybe. We're just gonna also drop it kind of along the snout. I think it gives a nice little sparkle there. Let's see. Maybe along the eye here, we'll add a little bit of it too. Okay, and then I think also kind of dancing around the edges, it'll be nice to add some of this fun blue color. I do this a lot in my paintings. Probably a lot of you recognize I like to add like this little blue sparkle around the edges. I know if you don't want to do it in too many places because then it kind of loses its impact, but it's fun to kind of drop it around in a few places. And we're gonna make a white highlight up along the head, so that will really make it pop as well. But I think it's fun to add a little bit of this color here right now. A little more texture on the snout. We don't wanna do like every little hair because that just kind of takes away from the look of it. If we do that, it's just too much. Okay, let's put that brightest white highlight in that I talked about because I think that's gonna really make the head pop. So I'm gonna go back to that recipe that I used for that yellow, which was white and Hansa Yellow Opaque and Pyrrole Red Light, but now it's gonna be like mostly white. And we wanna make sure our white is not contaminated because that will kill our color. So I'm just gonna put some fresh white in my color here and just add a little bit of the yellow and the red to it, but it's gonna be mostly white. I might need to add even more white. I'm not gonna put any glaze in here because I want this to be opaque. I need more white. Really want this to pop. Almost completely white with just like the touch of yellow and red to warm it up a little bit. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. See how that's really gonna make this bright edge pop. And only look for those very brightest areas. So it's not going everywhere. It's just going in those really bright areas along the edge. Yeah, along the top. Kind of keeping that loose, fuzzy edge. Gives the dog volume, makes the hair feel fluffy. And then the nose, edge of the nose here is picking up a pretty bright highlight. It's right here on the back. There's a lot of contrast in this image. I think that's why I was drawn to it. I usually look for images that have high contrast because it makes it, they're just easier to paint, and I figure you might as well make it easier for yourself. When you've got an image with a lot of midtones, it really makes it a challenge to find the forms because it's hard to tell what's what. That's another reason why I will kind of filter my images, my reference images, because it will kind of intensify some of that drama and make it easier to tell what's what. Maybe I'm gonna offload my brush just a little bit and go back and just brighten up those teeth with this color. Kind of pulls those teeth out. I'm not doing every bit of the teeth, I'm just kind of pulling out the brightest parts. There we go. Okay. Kind of squinting at my image to see where else I want to put this brightest highlight. Got a little coming down there. Squinting is a great tool to figure out what is most important in your image. Some people say they take off their glasses when they're trying to see it a little bit blurrier. I have pretty good eyesight, so I can't do that tip, but it sounds great. All right, so let's do that bright highlight on the tip of the tongue. And I want to like warm up the pink tone a little bit. So we're not just going to use the magenta. We're gonna add a little bit of the Pyrrole Red light to it as well. So I'm going to use white, quinacridone magenta, and a little bit of Pyrrole Red light to make a warmer pink. And I'm gonna just put those little dashes of highlight there. You can see where the tongue is going up and over the teeth, so it's in highlight. And the tongue is wet. I'm not gonna paint that line down the tongue because I think that would be too much. A little highlight on the gum there. So instead of painting that line, I'm gonna paint the highlight that's going to kind of show that there's a crease there. So I'm just gonna paint a little highlight on top of this area of shadow. And I'm gonna do that with some quinacridone magenta and some white. Maybe just those two. I'm gonna add a little glaze to it. And just drop a highlight on top, which kind of gives the indication that the tongue is creased right there. But I'm not going to actually paint in the black line. So I think one thing we need to do before we're done here is we want to put our darkest blacks in because those kind of got lost. They don't feel super dark. So I want to go back and find those really dark blacks. Sorry guys, it says the video's cutting out, but we've done pretty well, haven't we? We've made it to almost the end here. Hopefully our video will come back. I'm going to make a black with Payne's Gray and alizarin crimson and a little bit of phthalo green. So I'm gonna make a really deep dark black. Payne's Gray, Alizarin Crimson, and Phthalo Green. All right, looks like I'm back. Wonderful. Sorry if you lost me for a few seconds there. I'm painting in a super dark black. That's what I'm working on. And I'm gonna look deep into this eye and find just where it's supposed to be super black. So I gotta tilt it. I got a reflection there. I need to be able to see it. Okay. So I'm getting pretty specific here with my blacks on the eye so I can get this shape just right. Zooming in, and then I'm going to go over to my nose and zoom in so I can see it really well. Find those really dark areas. It's really dark under the nose here. It's amazing how dark it is. I didn't have it nearly dark enough. Yep, we've got this dark chunk of the eye right there. All right, zoom back out. I'm gonna put the darks in the mouth, and then we're gonna be pretty much done with this demo for tonight. Thank goodness we were able to keep enough of an internet connection to get the majority of the demo through to you guys. If you missed something, it might be better watching the replay. Hopefully the replay caught the whole video. I can't promise, but I'm hoping. Just never know what Facebook's gonna do for us, or internet connection. Pretty dark here. Again, this black I made with Payne's Gray, Alizarin Crimson, and Phthalo Green blue shade. And just looking for these areas that are totally black in the image. Yeah, that really makes it stand out. We'll kind of go up around these teeth that we dropped in here with that black. I feel like I want to do a little bit of a white sparkle on the top of the nose. I think I want to brighten that up just a pinch. Yeah, so I'm gonna go back to that green, or not green, gray that I made. Actually, you know what I'll do? I'm gonna use my black that I already mixed up. I'm gonna add some white to it, which will make me a nice light gray. And I can use that to do a sparkle on the nose. Just want it to be a few notches brighter than what I already have. Doesn't really matter if my white's contaminated because I'm making a gray, which is a neutral, so not as important. We'll just do a little sparkle there on the nose. And so that it's not contaminated. And I'm going to just grab some straight white, and I'm gonna put that in at the top where I want it to be super, super intense white. So hopefully this shows up just a little bit brighter than what we've had already. So we don't want any glaze in here. We want this really intense white highlight. And not everywhere, just in a few places. So we kind of build our way up to these really bright highlights and really dark darks. We kind of started in the middle and like worked our way out towards those. And that's a good way to approach really any of your work. Save the brightest highlights and the darkest darks and drop those in at the end and really make them jump. And actually there's a really bright highlight right on the tongue right there. I'm gonna add a tiny bit of red to my white and just drop that in as like a peach highlight there. So I feel like it's like glowing and it really just needed that little bit there. Yeah, a little more. Okay, I'm gonna call it done. It's done. All right. Thank you guys for watching this demo. If you enjoyed it, would you guys do me a favor and hit the share button? I would really appreciate it. It helps me to keep this going every week for new people to find me and watch these demos. So thank you again. And if you want to do this demo with me, you can grab the download of the outlines on my website, allykstudio.com. Don't forget to share your painting if you painted with me in my group, Allie's Paint Friends, and I will see you guys next week. Have a great night, take care, and happy painting.